presentation for today will be around igniting the flywheel, the power of developer communities. I know it might sound a bit abstract, but bear with me, we're gonna find together what this is all about. Also, another disclosure, this is gonna be a bit theoretical. It's a bit hard to build a developer community in 20 minutes, but I'm confident that you're gonna take the learnings from here and apply them when you're gonna build your own developer communities. So, as I'm sure you all know, it's not enough to have a strong product or service. On top of that, you need people to know about your product or service, and also you need to have a great experience for those people, for your users. And I would take it even one step further, and I would say that you need a great community for your product or service. Now, remember the flywheel I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation? This is the flywheel I was talking about. So when you have a protocol, you have a bunch of applications built on top of the protocol. And the more applications you have built on top of the protocol, the more valuable your protocol becomes. So for those of you that studied telecommunications, you might be familiar with Metcalfe's law, which basically says that the value of a network is proportional to the square of the number of connected users. This is also known as the network effect. So basically, to fully benefit from this flywheel effect, you need to have that community of developers who are building applications on top of your protocol. Now, a bit about myself. My name is Bianca Buzea. I'm the founder of DevRel University. That's the first program who offers guidance and courses for people who want to start into DevRel. The first two cohorts have been shaped to Web3. Now we're launching one for Web2. You can find my socials over there. I'm always more than happy to chat. Back to our presentation. On Ethereum, most of the transactions are done by bots. To come in, with even more data, you can see that on average, in terms of smart contracts released daily, there are like 11,000. And that's a 24.7 increase versus the previous quarter. In terms of daily active users, we have around 350,000. And in terms of smart contracts created per quarter, we have 1.45 million. So what does all this data mean? How do we put all this data together? So unless you're deploying one new smart contract per month, you need to make this hyper growth make work for you and not against you. So how do we do that? How does success look like? So you need to have an ecosystem, so basically applications built on top of your technology. And also, a second part, you need integrations with other existing applications and tools that are out there. That's the definition of success. Now, this brings us to Reed's law. You might see that today we're talking about laws. And a summary, what Reed's law says is that networks get more valuable when you form subgroups that can collaborate and exchange information. This is also known as the compound network effect, and this applies really well for blockchain, where everything is composed together and interacts with each other, and the more you can make applications work with each other, the more valuable those applications are, and the network itself. So I hope that by now I convinced you that we need applications, we need those applications to work with each other. We need a community of developers to build those applications for the protocol, but how do we achieve that? So my response to that is using developer relations. For those of you that are not super familiar with the term, that's okay. The term has been introduced in the 1980s at Apple, at the Macintosh division. So comparing to other areas out there, this is somehow new. And the way I like to present developer relations is by looking at the two words that compose this term. So first we have developer. So what does it mean? You have to take care of the documentation, you have to take care of the tooling, APIs, tutorial, to ensure the support for developers in a nutshell. And then the second part are the relations. And how do we form those? We form those at events, building, meeting people, and supporting them. We form those using content creation. You also have developer marketing. You might see that I put in quotes, developer marketing. Those of you a bit technical know that there's no such thing as developer marketing. Developers detect very easily BS, so you have to be careful how you communicate to them. And also, there is relaying feedback. And this goes both ways, from the organization to the developers and from the developers to the organization. Now, here are the main pillars of DevRel. First, we have outreach. We can have this online or in person. And this basically encompasses all the activities you take in order to make your product known. We have the community element, and I would say that that's the most important element. It enables developer to be successful with your product. Then we have the product, and here it's very important to capture the feedback that you have from your community such that you can influence your roadmap and you can define in the future the product. And then there is education and support. So again, it's not enough only to build a very good product. You need to help people learn how to use your product, and also you need to give them support to use your product. Now, I'm going to break these pillars into even lower fragmentation, if you want. So first part is going to be documentation. Ideally, this should be the source of truth, up to date and complete. I'm saying ideally because that's in reality not always the case. And this should be, you should also have here like a no-brainer quick start app that should enable the developer to have their first win. Ideally, this should be under 10 minutes, such that if someone goes to your documentation portal, they can go to your quick start, they can do something really quickly, and they can gain confidence and continue to use your product. If they don't find such a quick start, it might be more difficult for the user to stick around. Now, there are different types of documentation out there. There are tutorials. Those allow a newcomer to get started. The way I like to present the different types of documentation is by using analogy to cooking and food. We all love that, at least the food part. So tutorials, basically, an analogy would be when you teach a kid how to cook. So it's not that important what you actually teach the kid to cook. What is important is that the kid does something related to cooking, they gain confidence, and they want to repeat this process again in the future. The next one is how-to guides. Those help solve a specific problem. So again, to the cooking analogy, here would be teaching someone to do a specific, following a specific recipe for cooking something. For example, you want to do pizza, so in order to make pizza, you need to follow certain steps in a particular order. The next one is technical reference. This basically describes the system. So going back to our food analogy, if you want here, it would be the technical specification of a certain ingredient. So for example, garlic, you might think about the Wikipedia page for garlic. You found there its scientific name. You find its chemical constituents, properties, potential issues, so on and so forth. And then last but not least, there is the explanation. And this one helps you understand how different things work together. So if you want here, an example would be how cooking and human health, how they influence each other. You can have a book, for example, about these two. Also, I attached in here a picture from Divio. So for those of you interested to learn more about the documentation, that's a very good resource. And as you might see here, it differs. Like some of these are oriented to work towards the working phase, such as how-to guides and the reference, whereas others are more oriented towards the understanding phase, such as tutorial and explanation. Now, user feedback. This is really important. And here you might have like one-to-one interviews. You might do those as often as weekly, of course, with different users, not the same user every week. And here it's very important to act as if you're not actually there. What do I mean by that? You should not influence the user. So we might be tempted to say, if you're with the user, oh, hey, press that button, or hey, put that command. But that's not really valuable, because what you want to do is to see how the user interacts without your help and where they get blocked and how in the future you can make sure that they don't get blocked again. Next, we have questionnaires. You might make those less often. For example, you might have them either quarterly or twice a year. And these also are very valuable in terms of data about your product and how you can optimize it. And the third one, and I think personally the most valuable ones, are in person. So basically during events, if you're running a hackathon, you're going to have developers come to you with their questions and their feedback. Hey, this is not working. Hey, you're missing this part of the documentation. And also, you might be surprised, like how people people will remember you and will ask you whenever they get the opportunity to meet you. So that's valuable to capture that feedback. Now, another pillar is to help your community achieve their goals. And it's important here to help people where they are. This means that even if they are not planning to integrate with your product, if you're able to help them, you should still help them. Like, for example, if you're a hackathon and someone asks for your help, as Solange mentioned earlier, even if it's not for your company, you're still going to help that person. And another important fact here, you shouldn't artificially try to convince people to use your product when your product it's not a good fit. Because sooner rather than later, they are going to discover that it's not a good fit, and you're losing their trust. However, on the other side, if you're actually telling the truth and you're like, hey, I don't think this is like the best fit for this situation, you're getting their trust, and in the future you will be surprised, but they're gonna find a way to use your product. Next, we have grants program, and these are a great way to help projects go one step further. So for example, for a hackathon winner, the grant might not be enough to go with the project to the next stage. So here is where they can access a grant and they can have a fully fledged proof of concept. And then we have accelerator program. These are fixed term, cohort-based, and usually they include mentorship, educational components, and sometimes even financial components. Now, events. We all love events. Here you can have meetups. These are rather focused on a given topic. For example, if you want to build a connection, a relationship with the Berkeley Society of Blockchain, you might want to organize a meetup in collaboration with them. Similarly, you can use meetups as a mode to research when expanding to a new geographical area. Look, you can see like what meetups are out there and how you can integrate with them. Next, we have hackathons. Beware, these are resource intensive. And I'm talking here both in terms of human but also in terms of capital. So what do I mean? In terms of human, you'll need to make sure that you have developers and engineers on your side available to answer questions, to offer support to hackers, and also to judge the submissions. And in terms of capital, the bounties that you need to offer are pretty substantial. So you want to make sure that you're allocating these resources correctly. So it's really useful before committed to a certain hackathon to have goals for a hackathon, like why are we joining this hackathon? Maybe you have like a new feature that you released or a new product, you want to test that out and to see how people integrate with it, that's great. Maybe you want people to play around with your documentation and tooling, that's also perfectly fine. Or you want to hire, hackathons are great for sourcing talent. Or even getting feedback. Doesn't matter what's your reasoning for participating, but you should have this established before joining the hackathon. Next, you want to decide if the hackathon fits the target audience. For example, if your product is for very advanced developers, and the hackathon is rather for newbies, this might not be the perfect fit. So you might want to reconsider. In a similar way, you want to see the difference between large versus small events. With large events, those are great. There are a lot of participants, a lot of sponsors, but the relationships built during such events are not always the best. Sometimes it's still worth to participate in such a big event, but in some cases, you might want to look to a smaller event. And also here, it's good to optimize for targeted geographical areas. So for example, if you want to expand to Southeast Asia, maybe it's worth organizing a hackathon in Vietnam. And last but not least, we have conferences. Usually those have multiple tracks, as is the case here. You might have like DeFi, tooling, security, you name it. So you need to optimize for the best track. You might want to check the sponsors and the target audience before committing to a conference. And also look at the previous editions of the conference to get a sense about how the talks look like, who's participate, so on and so forth. If you're looking for a list for different conferences and events in Web3, I recommend to you Crypto Nomads Club. I'm not affiliated with them by any means. I just like their work. I think they did an amazing job of putting together a comprehensive list of all the events. Now, awareness. Under this goes content creation. You might have blog posts, case studies, Twitter threads, podcasts, videos, you name it. You can be as creative as you want. However, what I want to emphasize here is that you can really leverage this awareness using cross-pollination. So you can do this content creation in collaboration with another protocol. And by doing that, you're basically leveraging your audience and your community with theirs, and you're exchanging them at the same time. Similarly, you might want to do an initiative together, such as organizing an event. Now, the last part I want to talk about is to identify and reward your superstars. And here you might consider to have an ambassador program. I would say it's important not to start with financial compensation because that might attract the wrong people. Instead, you might want to be creative and to offer other types of incentives. For example, you might want to offer access to the core team. You might want to organize something like a private channel where people can connect between each other, but also you connect them with your core team. You might want to send them swag. You'll be surprised how good they feel when you send them swag. You might want to share their wins and support their initiatives. And you can be as creative as you want with this type of rewards. Now, I know this sounds a lot, and you might ask if this is hard work. Yes, indeed, this is hard work, but it's absolutely worth it. So if you are interested about this, I would like to invite you to check out DevRel Uni. It's a program that helps people get into DevRel, so you might learn way more about what I presented here. You get 5 sessions with professionals from the space, you get industry knowledge, assignments, and a very supportive community. And if you scan the QR code out there, it's gonna point you to a form. There is a code. One of the questions will ask you for a code, for 2 people who are completing the form today, who have followed the session, we're going to have 2 seats reserved for them into the next course. So that's it on my side. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Does anyone have a question?
I see.
Hey, firstly, thanks for the talk. It's really insightful. I guess 2 questions. Like, firstly, there's quite a lot that you've covered there. If you were to prioritize some certain areas with that, maybe you're just starting a DevRel function or something along those lines, where would you start, or what would you say is a priority? And then also wondering how would you form, like, what kind of KPIs, not to get too regimental there, but how would you understand if it's working or not?
Sorry, what's exactly the first question? Where I would start?
What would you prioritize? Maybe there's a couple of things that you'd start with if you're just kind of starting to build a DevRel function, I guess. Like, where would you start?
Yeah, so I would say I would definitely prioritize the documentation, because without proper documentation, there is no way for anyone to figure it out, or it's extremely hard to figure it out how to use your product. So I would start there. And then in terms of KPIs, like for each of these sections, you might apply KPIs. Those can be quantitative and also qualitative. So to give you an example, for let's say a blog post you put out there, you might count like how many people read out that post, like number of clicks, number of likes, number of comments. Those are quantitative. And then qualitative, you might see in their comments like, hey, this blog post helped me build a new feature for my project. That's type of qualitative, like how your work out there has helped someone.
Thanks.
Another question?
Hey, great presentation again. I might have missed it because I was a little bit late, but I was wondering how much technical knowledge you would need to be involved in the DevRel, because obviously there's a large marketing component to it, but at the same time you have to have depth of understanding of the technical tool that you're looking to onboard developers into. So do you, for example, advise people to have 2 halves of the function, like someone who's focused more on the marketing side and then someone who's focused on the technical side? Or do you think that you can have someone competent enough to do both?
That's a great question. In fact, a dirty little secret, most of the people in DevRel have been engineers in the past, so they are quite technical. However, I would say under the DevRel umbrella, there are various roles. You might have developer relations engineer, as the name says, these people are quite technical focused. You might have developer advocates, a bit more oriented towards advocacy, but still technical. You might have someone like technical community manager, developer relations manager who manages the whole team. My point here is that these roles have like different degrees, if you want, of technical knowledge, but in principle, yes, technical knowledge is needed, and the more you have it, the easier you're gonna navigate the role.
Yeah. Last question?
What's the difference between the, like, from your understanding, community in our world of Web3 and team?
Sorry, I'm not sure.
Like, what's the difference between community and team? In DAOs, I've seen that as a question.
I'm not sure what you refer by
What's
team.
your perception of the difference of how the management is in DAOs, like in community, and in a team, like core team?
Yeah, so I guess the first difference is that it takes more time in a DAO to agree, to come to a consensus. So that's something you should have in mind. And probably you might want that some decision be taken faster. And you might want that a certain subset of decisions are taken by the core team, and the rest is decided with the community. Some decisions sometimes are time sensitive, and you can't wait for a snapshot and all that time.
And those decisions are usually in the technical space?
Not necessarily.
Do you think like branding yourself, like DevRel, is important in terms of gaining like, yeah, reputation in the space and trust and the network among the developers is important to be a good DevRel?
I mean, if you're a DevRel, definitely developers will sense if you're a good DevRel. So just attaching the name without doing the facts is not of a lot of help. But if you're actually doing the actions as well, then I see no problem.
Yeah, I think branding is a little bit like purposely, intentionally doing that. But actually, if you have been already helping the community, they will recognize your effort. Like I get that. Yeah. So thanks.
Thank you, Bianca.
Thank you.